So this is my workspace, which is basically like many at the corner of my kitchen in my home in Dublin. This kind of area, which I suppose you could call my office, is permanently here. It's where I have all my magazines, all my books, kind of collections of images from over the years. I have some fabrics that I'm working with at the moment down there as well. I keep all my fabrics. I have tons of fabrics which I've collected over the years in storage kind of in another room, but what I've done is I've actually pulled out a selection to work on for Rev for the initial stages. So kind of laces, cottons, silks, kind of quite feminine, sort of flowy fabrics, just to kind of get a feel for what I'm trying to achieve as I work through my research. I'm hoping to go to London next week to actually buy my fabrics that I'm going to work with on my final pieces, but I feel it's important to sort of establish the kind of weights that I want to work with before I do that, because you can make a lot of very expensive mistakes if you jump too far ahead with your fabrics. This is my stand, so I'm at the point now where I'm starting to develop on stand work, which I really, really enjoy. And over here we have the setup of my machines, my overlocker. So I predict I'll be spending a lot of time sitting in that chair in the next couple of months, which I'm looking forward to, I have to say. This is my sketchbook, so this is kind of the main focus of what I've been doing so far. My project is based on Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. Quickly sort of talk you through it. So just some initial thoughts. As a starting point, I started to pull some stills from the film. There was a film version from about 2 years ago, which I felt was a lot more colourful and opulent than the 1947 version. So I started to pull stills and just started to think, reread the book and started to think about different ideas that I could start to look at. So things like the notion of white, which is used throughout the book, Faust, decadence, floral motifs, obviously Victorian clothing, the drowning of Sybil Vane, which is one of the characters. So it's a really complex book. There's a huge amount of ideas to pull from. I suppose an obvious start was to look at decay, because obviously the book is about the moral decay of Dorian after he swaps his soul with the soul of a painting of him, which he becomes enamoured with. I started to pull images that I felt sort of reminded me or represented decay, sort of the kind of grotesqueness, and started to do some drawings from them. But it became very obvious to me very quickly that I didn't want to go down the sort of tearing fabrics, tea staining route. So I started to think about different ways of representing the passing of time and started to look at cobwebs. So I started to photograph some images of cobwebs and sort of other drawings and references towards cobwebs. Because to me they denote the passing of time. So if you sort of think of the Lady Havisham kind of look, Havisham. There's some drawings I've done. I always like to spend a bit of time drawing from my images to sort of really look at them. It became instantly obvious to me that I could start to use the linear quality that was happening with these within the scenes of clothing, that maybe it wouldn't be about pattern or print, that it would actually just be sort of unusual creation of scenes not to hold fabric together but actually as a surface treatment. Some drawings for maybe some print ideas, pulling shapes. I found these paintings by a lady called Valerie Hegarty. She does these quite sort of Victorian paintings and then destroys them, which I felt really tied into my theme. And again, the idea of destruction. Again, some references. This is a lovely linear piece. I think it's Burberry. I came across these images then of crochet that looks like cobwebs, and I started to go back to the idea again of floral motifs, which I sort of jumped out at me when I reread the book, and how crochet obviously ties into lace. Lace is very prevalent to Victorian society, and particularly in the upper classes, Victorian clothing. I'm playing around with the moment. They're actually on the stand, I can show you. Doilies, which I spent 4 hours yesterday trying to source and only managed to find one pack, half a Dublin. So I'm just playing around with them a small amount, but I have been exploring lace quite a bit as well. So there's just more images, looking at the lines, doing drawings, thinking about placement around the body. I put these images up on the blog. I did a lot of stand work with jersey, which I cut into strips and just draped around the body, thinking again about if it's just been seams, but I loved the way it hung. It was really heavy on the body, sort of did a drawing there to try and illustrate that, and made me start to think, well, maybe I could actually work with strips of fabric, because it's sort of tied into, I suppose, how Dorian becomes so weighed down by his, guilt and his conscience. It sort of ties into that in the film. There's just some designs I started to do. Again, looking at crumbling decay. I've filled my sketchbook with the quotes that these different ideas came from. This is not my true face. That's a quote from the film. Let's just pull that image, just to show the division between what we see and what's really happening. And I've discussed some ideas there of maybe doing a collection that is one half maybe simple and beautiful, and the other half quite destroyed and aged. Or perhaps to do a collection that from the outside looks really beautiful, but when you open it, the inside details would be sort of less pretty. Again, sort of delicateness, linear. Started doing up some swatches, fraying organza. I really love this fabric. I want to try and get some more of it to play around with. It's lovely when it's on the body because it actually sits off the body and curves, but it's very, very delicate. Started to pull through some of the drawings that I'd done and actually place them around the body, creating potential designs. I'm hoping to start toiling these, which is just to do basically a prototype. So, for example, I'm very drawn to this piece, and I'd actually like to see how I would try to construct it and start to work at the stand, and then maybe develop it further. I like the idea of within the seams there being areas that are pleated or gathered, that there's a lot going on, but maybe within a much more simple silhouette. And some more ideas. I think it could be quite challenging to construct some of these, but see where it takes me. This was a sculpture piece I saw in a park in Brussels over Easter, and it got me thinking about weaving, but I don't particularly like weaving, so I started to just weave the stripe lines of the jersey across the body. Again, just back to decay, images that I feel represented. Some photographs I took. Starting to play around with lace, pulling images from Victorian society that could give maybe some interesting silhouettes, because you could see a lot of that happening within the film. So really, the linear quality of the cobwebs really tie in with the floral motif, the lace, which ties into the clothes, which really ties into the floral motif that's throughout the book. Again, some drawings, just basically taking areas of the cobwebs and placing different types of seam potential ideas across the body. That's just an image I really love. I started to spray paint through the lace onto paper and onto fabric, because while I like the idea of losing lace, I actually like the idea of using lace to put a print on the fabric in some way. So it's the sort of sense of the lace, and I think it'll give it a sort of more modern and contemporary feel. Just more research. I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm going back and I'm pulling this research and starting to work with it. Again, just some swatches that I did up with the lace. You can see it throughout the film, and this again ties into the doilies ideas, which I'm kind of reworking these up on the stand. It's my jersey. And I love, again, the weight of the lines, that sort of sense of being pulled down. The start of the sketchbook is really about Sybil Vane, one of the characters that I focused on, because for me she sort of represents the really romantic side to the book. I think these images really capture what I see her, and they really fed into my colour story. Sense of someone being so innocent and sort of their innocence being taken. Again, sort of a romantic but sort of destructive element within the book. So these images have really fed into my swatches, as you can see, the kind of ruffling, the gathering, and primarily as well my colour story. I kind of dip dyed this, but I'd like to try it with other fabrics. You can see that image from the film. And again, I think that notion of the white and destruction, it ties into that. Some images from Hamish Morrow, the one I'm a huge fan of. Again, sort of looking at the notion of innocence being lost, she's seduced. The photograph I took and placed over another image. Back to sort of looking at Victorian clothing. There's some stand work that I did, which I want to build on a lot more. I mean, historical clothing references can really sort of feed into your shapes very, very well, because at the moment I feel a lot of the work I've done, it's feeding into my swatches, it's feeding into my colours, it's kind of feeding into the concepts, but a lot of these pages are slightly empty because I didn't really bring them anywhere. But it's not feeding into my shapes enough. So again, the destroyed flower, the wilting beauty. I'm actually going to, I think I'm going to take some flowers and sort of let them wilt and take some photographs from them, because I loved this image and I was able to get tons of different shapes from it. You can see them there. And then play around with them on the body to come up with some really lovely designs. You see there. You know, they've really fed into sort of shape ideas. So, I mean, that's definitely something I could really pull some primary research and develop on. But I'd love to take these areas, and I intend on taking these sort of areas that I think are working really well, and actually toile them up in fabric and see where they take me. And just some drawings and sort of the wilting flower. One thing that I've come on as well in recent days is my customer profile, and I'll talk to you about that again. Sybil Vane dies within the novel. She drowns, and that's got me starting to think about sort of this notion of the drowned woman in Victorian society and in Victorian literature and painting. You know, the scorned, destroyed, ruined woman. Not scorned, but ruined. And I started to look at all these imagery from the time and other imagery of women floating, and it really again fed into sort of swatches. I dyed up some fabrics in these colours. So the obvious one is Ophelia. Just gathering. There's a lot of movement within the swatches, and I think I could really recreate that on the stand as well with fabrics. I love this image. It's just, she's holding the garment up, but it actually looks like she's floating. And when you really look into it, I found some really interesting essays and images in relation to this topic. The movement, colours. I got the inspiration for those swatches as well from soaking fabrics in water. I actually took all these images of just fabric soaking. It totally changes the surface, they become shiny. And these are just my colour stories that I've developed. So I think I'm going to possibly go with this one. I like the blue. I like that there's grey tones, that there's sort of a pretty romantic edge to the pinks, but you have all these beautiful grey tones coming through from that image.